Hello, good day. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Thank you for joining me today. Today, I'll be talking about Azure Virtual Network. Azure Virtual Network is actually an important area in Azure that, as administrators, we need to look at. It serves as the foundation for private networking in Azure that allows you to build scalable, available, and isolated network that is similar to your on-premise network. First of all, for you to create a virtual network in Azure, this is an architectural diagram of the virtual network I'm going to create in Azure and how everything is going to flow. Here, first thing first, to create a resource in Azure, you need a subscription. After getting your subscription, the next thing you need to create a resource group. As the name implies, resource group. So it's a place where you could group different resources. So one of the resource I'm going to be creating under this resource group is virtual network. This virtual network now has address space of 10.0.0.0/16 that is housing two subnets. So the first subnet is housing is the web server subnet, and the second subnet is the database subnet. Let's look at address space as a city, as a city limit. Now, what does this address space tells us? It defines the overall area your virtual network covers. The overall area your virtual network covers in that city. In when if we are using city as an example, let's say we are using our locality, which is Yaba, as an example, where we have several towns close to Yaba. Yaba now is the city. The address space now is Yaba. Yaba now is the address space that defines the overall area or IP range that the virtual network can cover. Under Yaba now, we have different neighborhood. The address space is like the city, while the subnet is more or less like the neighborhood under the address space. Now we have resources under this subnet. We have a virtual machine here that is hosting our web server, and we have a network interface card that has a public IP address attached to it. Also, we have a database subnet that have a virtual machine here and also have SQL database. Now, the IP address range for this subnet is 10.0.1.0/24, while this address range is 10.0.0/24. Here now, resources under this subnet now will have IP of 0.0.0. It will start from .4 because Microsoft Azure will take the first three IP address and the last one. So it will start from .4. So with this other subnet here. Now we are going to go to the lab so that we could see how we could create a virtual network in Azure. Let me just sign into my Azure portal. So we are going to reproduce what we have on the screen. So there we go. Let me just hoop my other screen to the presentation. Let me just maximize it so we could see it very clearly. Make it 200. Okay. Seems it's still too small. Let me increase it. Okay. So first of all, this is Azure portal. First thing first, I'll search for the resource I want to create, and the resource I want to create is virtual network. I'll just go virtual network. Click on it, virtual network. I have several virtual network, but I'm going to create a new virtual network here. So we just click on create. We'll wait for it to load, and once it loads, we begin the creation process. Let's just wait for it to load. Here we go. Just like I mentioned earlier that before you create a resource, you need a subscription. Here is my subscription. I'm going to select it. Then under the resource group, I'm going to be creating a new resource group for my VNet. I'll be calling it my VNet RG. That will be the name of the resource group. I'll just say, okay. The VNet name, I'll just give it my test, my test VNet. That will be the name I'm giving my VNet. I'm okay with the location, West Europe. I'll just go next to security. Under security now, you could decide to enable virtual network encryption, which it allows you to encrypt traffic traveling within virtual network. But since it's a test environment, I won't want to do that. And also you could use Azure Bastion. Azure Bastion is a paid service that provides secure RDP SSH connectivity to your virtual machine over the TLS. This is a better way of accessing your virtual machines rather than using the public IP, but it's a paid service. You could also create Azure Firewall under your VNet so that you could manage traffic flows to your virtual network using your firewall. So you could create some rules, and also you could use Azure distributed denial of service network protection that enables you to mitigate DDoS attacks. So all these are services that you could security measures that you could use under your virtual network. First one we have is virtual network encryption that enables you to encrypt traffic traveling within your virtual network. While the next one is Azure Bastion service. It's a paid service that enables you to connect to your virtual machines rather than using public IP. So you could just use a secure RDP or SSH connectivity to your virtual machine. In our labs that is going to come, I'm going to be creating a virtual machine and we're going to use Azure Bastion service to access that virtual machine. Let's just go, and we will still also create resources, firewall resource, and see how we could use it to manage traffic in our environment. Let's go to IP addresses. Under IP addresses now, we could see that by default it gave us this address space, which is 10.0.0/16. So I'll just go ahead and delete it. So we'll go ahead to create the address space ourselves. So I'll just click on add address space. So once I click it, it automatically gave me this address space. So under this address space now, you could edit it. Let's say for instance now, you don't want to use 10.0.0.0/16. You want to use any other address space as the case may be. You could just edit it and select it. Here now we have the addresses that it could give. Here now we have 65,536 addresses. That's what you could get using /16. If for instance you want to reduce it, you could just select /19, which gives you 8,192, or you could just go lower to /24, which is just 256 addresses. But the what you select here should determine should you should know that if you select a higher address, so it gives you more chances of having more IPs for your resources rather than that. So I'll just suggest we use /16 for our demonstration. Here now, after creating this address space, the next thing we'll need to do is to create a subnet. For us to create a subnet now, we'll just click on this plus sign here, add a subnet. I'll now click on add a subnet. Yeah, we'll just wait for it to load. So on our architectural diagram, we have two subnets. The first subnet is actually we are actually calling that subnet our web server subnet. So it's going to be our subnet for web server, and the address range that we specify on our diagram was 10.0.0/24. So I'm going to be changing it to, okay, here it's already /24. I'll just leave it that way. Then the name, I want to rename it. Okay, let me just leave it this way. Then click on save. Let's wait for it to save, but we can also edit it. So let me edit it. Let me see. Could change the name. Okay, name. So I'll just call it web server subnet. Okay. So the name is going to be web server subnet. So I'll just click on save. So at least if any administrator comes, I can just say, okay, just go to my test VNet, create the virtual machine under web server subnet. I'm going to be adding another subnet for our database, and I'm going to be calling that subnet database servers subnet. I'll just still go to the top just like the way I added web server subnet. I'll just click on add subnet. I'll call it web server database subnet. So let's go database subnet. Okay, I will just now the address space is giving me is 10.0.1.0, just like we're saying about address space. So the address space here now is speaking is 10.0.0/16. So it's going to be giving me addresses, starting addresses on that particular address space specified. Now it's giving me 10.0.1.0, which is okay by me, and I'm going to be using it as my database subnet. So I'll just go down and select add. So once I add it, now I'm going to be having two subnets here. I'll just click on review and create. Once I click on review and create, we are going to actually run the validation, and we are going to confirm our settings. So first of all, we picked our subscription, which is Virtual Studio subscription. Then we created a resource group for our VNet. The next thing we did was we named the resource group My Test VNet, and the region was West Europe. Under the security, we didn't enable any settings. We didn't enable Azure Bastion, we didn't enable Azure Firewall, and we didn't enable Azure Distributed Denial of Service Network Protection. Under the address space, we use 10.0.0.0/16, which gave us 65,536 addresses, and we created two subnets under this address space with IP range of 10.0.0.0/24, which gives us 256 addresses, and also for our database subnet 10.0.1.0/24, which gives us 256 addresses. Here we are going to create. We'll just wait for the deployment to complete, and once it completes, we are going to have our virtual network created. So in our next video, I'm going to be creating a virtual machine under this virtual network, just like we have on our architectural diagram, where we have a virtual machine on the web server subnet, and we have another virtual machine on the database subnet, and also an SQL database. We are going to be doing that in the next class. Let me just go to these resources so that will see all the components and all the settings of the virtual network. Here is my virtual network. I'll just wait for it to load. Once it loads, we are going to go and view some of the settings we have here. This is my virtual network. Under the location is was created in West Europe. Under the resource group, it was created in my VNet RG, and this is the address space 10.0.0/16. In creating a VNet, you could create multiple address space, but because I'm having only one address space, that's why only one address space is here. You can just go down under settings. You could see the address spaces you have. If you want to add additional address space, you could add additional address space. But if you want to add additional address space, you could add additional address space under connected device. Let's say, for instance, I've created a virtual machine on this particular VNet. I'm going to see those devices that are connected to this VNet under connected device. But because I've not created any resources under this VNet, so my connected devices is empty. So let's go to subnet. Under subnet, we are going to see the two subnets we created, which is web server and database subnet. Under Azure Bastion, we didn't configure Azure Bastion, so it will just be there because we didn't configure it for secure access to our virtual machines. DDoS protection, we didn't configure DDoS protection. So these are the settings you see. One important settings is the DNS server. So with this, you could create a custom DNS server. Your virtual network could be your custom DNS server, where you could specify the IPs of the servers that you want to be your DNS server here, so that once users are connected to this virtual network, it automatically populates the DNS settings on the NIC. And we could also do peering. Let's say you want to pair this let's say you want to pair this virtual network with another virtual network in another region. You could do that, which we are going to be exploring in our labs that we are going to be creating. And we could also use service endpoints and private endpoints, and we are going to be looking at all this extensively. That's going to be the end of our presentation for today. Thank you very much. Do hit the subscribe icon to subscribe to my YouTube channel. Thank you for being with me today. Thank you very much. Have a lovely evening. Bye.